We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! This is part 8 of What If Naruto Became a Demon King. During the second stage of the Chunin Exams, Orochimaru made a terrible mistake in blocking the seal that held the Kyuubi. He gave birth to a being with more power than Raizen himself. Watch as Uzumaki Naruto takes the world by storm as the new Demon King. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 16, Revenge is a dish best not served at all. Tsunade's eyes widened as she heard what Naruto had said. However, the words didn't seem to truly register for several seconds, in which time she stared at her fellow blonde with dinner plate-sized eyes. "What did you say?" she asked after a while, her voice holding a dangerous edge to it. Naruto heard the warning in her voice clear as day but ignored it as he chuckled. "I think you heard me, Tsunade. I win, you come back with me to Konoha." "No," Tsunade whispered, causing Naruto to frown. "Never again." "No. I won't go back." Spinning on the balls of her feet, Tsunade ran towards the exit. However, before she could get there, Naruto appeared in her path to stop her. Not that it did for long. Before the blonde Uzumaki could even open his mouth, Tsunade surprised him by smashing her fist into his face. Uff! Naruto was sent flying out of her way as Tsunade used her strength technique to increase the power of her punch. He was sent flying directly into a wall, only he didn't just hit it and stop, or even dent it. Naruto ended up smashing through the wall as if it were a deck of cards. Cracks formed along the hole where he went through, spreading through the entire wall before it collapsed in a heap of dust and rubble. Naruto continued flying. Now in the gambling parlor he ended up smashing through several dozen slot machines before being blasted into yet another wall. By this time he had lost enough momentum that the wall managed to stop him, but not before he left a large dent and cracks along the point of his impact. Naruto fell onto the ground, landing on his hands and knees. Behind him the area he had hit crumbled, leaving a gaping hole in the wall. "Naruto!" Looking up, Naruto saw Hana run towards him. She was kneeling down in front of him less than a second later, grabbing him by the arm and helping him up. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Naruto said. He stood up and cracked his back. "Wow, she does hit hard. And it looks like she did exactly what Shikamaru thought she would." Pressing a button on the radio in his ear, he said, "Shikamaru, Tsunade ran out on us and is leaving." "We know," Shikamaru said, sounding annoyed. "We heard the explosions from out here." "Then you know what to do," Naruto said, shutting off the radio and turning to Hana. He grinned at the Inuzuka female. "It looks like we'd better get moving or we might not get there in time to save our teammates. Let's go." The two ran out of the hall, leaving the shocked and frightened gamblers and workers running around frantically and freaking out at the amount of damage Tsunade's punch had caused. Tsunade continued running even after she got out of the casino. She kept a constant eye out as she made a hasty retreat to her hotel, her caution coming from her knowledge that Konoha ninja always traveled in squads of 4. The reason for this harkened back to the days when war was a constant and fighting was as natural as breathing. Back during the First Great Shinobi War, the 4-man unit had been created for fast, small-scale engagements. In those days it was discovered early on that ninjutsu were extraordinarily powerful. Even a single jutsu could theoretically take out an entire platoon of ninja. By making the squads smaller, it allowed them to move faster and avoid ninjutsu easier, thus avoiding large-scale losses in combat. As she made it to the hotel she was staying at, Tsunade figured she was almost home free. All she would have to do was pack her bags and hit the road. After that it shouldn't be too hard to loose the Konoha ninja after her, while she had never been forced to actively avoid them before now. So long as they hadn't changed their search patterns she could escape them indefinitely. If Konoha stuck by its standard protocols, then they would only have sent a 4-man squad after her. And they would probably use a net to try and hem her in now that she had escaped. Tsunade could only thank the stars that Sarutobi-sensei hadn't sent the ANBU after her. While she was sure that she would be able to defeat any pursers that found her, she knew that if she truly fought back then they would mark her as a missing ninja. She was just about to enter the hotel's main lobby, and began to feel a sense of relief. But before she could get in, a young woman appeared in front of her. The woman had shoulder-length black hair with bangs and onyx eyes. She was wearing a long bluish-black kimono with white trimmings, held closed by a white obi, and open-toed sandals with low heels. The most unusual thing about this woman was that she was carrying a small pig in a green jacket. "What are you rushing around for, Tsunade-sama?" she asked, forcing Tsunade to stop, lest she run the woman over in her haste. "This is no time to be standing around, Shizen," Tsunade said with a sense of urgency. "Hurry up and help me get our bags packed, we're leaving town." She tried to move past Shizen in order to make it to their room. Her eyes widened however, when she found that she couldn't move a muscle. "What? Cageman no jutsu complete," Shikamaru said as he walked out from behind the door to Tsunade's hotel, holding a hand seal for his jutsu. Tsunade gaped at the kid in front of her. She could see from his Konoha flak jacket that he was a Chunin. It was surprising enough that Sarutobi hadn't sent the ANBU after her, but to send a Chunin, and a kid at that, now that was just insulting. She knew of the jutsu he was using as well. The Kagemain no Jutsu allowed the user to extend their shadow on any surface, even water, and as far as they wanted as long as there was a sufficient area. Once it came into contact with the target's shadow, the two would merge and the target would become forced to imitate the user's movements. However, having been a Konoha ninja for years before leaving, Tsunade knew the shadow technique's weaknesses. The ability to manipulate shadows was not only tiring, but was subject to some form of diminishing and decreasing in potency each time it was used. If the user was low on chakra, the technique would also begin to deteriorate. Then there was its weakness with lighting. Without a sufficient amount of light to cast shadows, the technique had both issues in range and potency. And finally, a particularly strong opponent could break out of the technique, so long as the opponent was stronger than the person casting the jutsu. It was for this last reason that Tsunade knew she could break out easily, and she would have done it too. Then Tsunade would have smashed that Chunin with the lazy eyes in the face for holding her against her will. However, before she could even begin gathering her chakra, a clawed hand was pressed against her throat. Her eyes widened when she heard the voice belonging to the blonde who she had smashed through a wall back at the gambling parlor speak up. "I wouldn't attempt to break out of that technique if I were you." Four figures appeared around her and Tsunade recognized three of them as Inuzuka ninja dogs. The other was the woman that had been with the blonde, obviously their partner. Tsunade was cursing herself for having not thought about how they had found her. With an Inuzuka it would be impossible for her to fully escape, especially since they likely had more than enough of her scent to track her. A buzzing sound reached her ears and Tsunade felt like swearing even more as she saw several bugs she recognized as an Aburame's Kikaichu begin swarming around her. Now, even if she did manage to escape, she would be drained by the bugs long before she could make it to safety. However, just because she was caught didn't mean she was going to make it easy for them, or be pleasant about her capture. "I hope you brats don't think that just because I was caught means I'm coming back with you," Tsunade said. She turned her head and looked at the blonde holding his clawed hands to her throat with a glare. Rather than get angry, the blonde smirked, which only served to infuriate her more. "Now there's no need to be so harsh, Tsunade-chan," Naruto said in a pleasant voice. "Why don't we go to your room where we can all discuss this over some tea?" Tsunade frowned at him, her mind whirring as she tried to think of a way to use his offer as a chance to escape. Eventually, the Nara would get tired, freeing her from his shadow. The time was just a matter of how much chakra he had and how long he could hold it. The one she would need to take out first would be the Aburame. With his bugs he was her biggest threat. After that the other two should be simple, though Tsunade would admit to being wary of the blonde one. He had taken a full punch to the face and didn't look like he had a scratch on him. Still, if she played her cards right, she and Shizen could escape easily. Her hopes were dashed when the blonde said, "And don't try to escape when Shikamaru releases you from his shadow. You haven't felt it yet, but I've placed a rather nasty seal on you that will paralyze your entire nervous system and chakra coils should you even make an attempt at molding chakra for that strength technique of yours." Tsunade grunted, realizing that she had no choice but to do as the blonde said. "Fine, we'll go upstairs, but don't expect anything to come from this talk of ours." "Right," Naruto said. He turned his attention towards Shizen and smiled. "Thank you for stalling her long enough for Shikamaru to get into position, Shizen-san. You mean to tell me you were working with them?" Tsunade shouted, glaring at the younger woman with as much anger as she could muster. Shizen had the decency to look ashamed. Well, flashback. Shizen couldn't keep the frown off her face as she wandered around the city she and Tsunade had found themselves in. Unlike her mentor, a place like Tenzaka held no appeal for her. She didn't gamble, she rarely drank, and considering the number of brothels in town, the place was just generally disrespectful towards women. In just the last hour alone, she had been forced to disable several drunk men by cutting their Achilles heel when they tried hitting on her, and then getting angry when she turned them down. Worse still, she had lost Tsunade, again. She had woken up this morning to find that the woman she traveled with was already gone, or perhaps had never even returned that night. And while Shizen knew her master would be gambling somewhere, the problem was she didn't know where. Gambling parlors and casinos were a dime a dozen in this city. "I can't believe I lost Tsunade-sama again," she said in complaint. She would never complain when her teacher was around, having never been one to let others know when she was feeling down. Perhaps it was a side effect of having taken care of Tsunade for so long. She no longer cared what she herself wanted or felt, because she spent so much of her time just keeping Tsunade from doing something she would regret. But even though she would never complain out loud, didn't mean she never thought of reasons to complain. Oink, oink. Shizen looked down at the pig walking by her side. "I guess she does always come back, huh, Taunton?" Shizen said, smiling. The pig just let out more oinks. Whether that was an answer of some kind, or whether it was just doing that to make noise, was unknown to Shizen. Sometimes she thought that she could understand the little pig as if she were human. It wasn't long until Shizen found herself sitting down in a small restaurant, ordering a basic meal of fish and miso soup. As she was waiting for her meal to arrive, someone ended up sitting in her booth. Looking up, she blinked at the attractive blonde male who just gave her a grin as he said, "Excuse me, I was wondering if..." "No, I have no desire for you to show me what a real man is like," Shizen replied in a rather bored tone. Absently, she wondered what it was with men thinking that just because they were handsome meant they could get in her pants. "Actually, I was just hoping to ask you something," the blonde replied, causing Shizen to blush in embarrassment. "Oh, sorry. Perfectly all right," the young man said with a shrug. "I can't really blame you for thinking I was after you for more unclean reasons. You're a rather beautiful woman after all, and I'm sure any male worth his salt would at least make an attempt at spending a night with you." Shizen felt her face heating up a bit at the playful and flirty words. Whether or not the man was being honest, she couldn't deny that he had the flattery part of wooing a female down to a T. "I was actually hoping to ask if your name was Shizen." Almost as soon as the blonde said her name, Shizen was on her feet with a medical scalpel in her hand. A hand which had been halted by the blonde grabbing it with his own and keeping it in place. Her eyes widened when she tried to move it and couldn't even make her hand move a centimeter. While she didn't have Tsunade's strength, she was strong enough to give most jonin a run for their money. That this man could keep her from even making a simple hand movement showed he was much stronger than she was. Relaxed, the blonde said, "I'm not here to hurt you or anything. I just want to talk." Shizen remained silent as she waited for the man to speak again. Which he did, saying, "If I let you go, will sit back down and speak with me." Shizen thought over her options. Truth be told, she didn't know if she had many. She knew nothing of this man's capabilities and skills. She didn't know how strong he was. Aside from his small display in keeping her arm in place, she had no clue how fast he was, but if the way he had managed to catch her arm before she could bring her weapon to bear was any indication, then he was faster than her. In short, she knew next to nothing other than that he was likely stronger than her. That meant she more or less had to listen. "All right, I'll speak with you," Shizen said, and the blonde man let go. She sat back down and looked at the man evenly, if a little warily as well. "So what did you want to speak to me about?" "I suppose I'll start with introductions," the man said. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto." Shizen's eyes widened and she saw the man grin. "I'm guessing you either know a little about me, or you know about my clan." "Just a few rumors," Shizen replied, settling down from her surprise. "You just recently got famous in the ninja world from what I hear, but since I don't keep in contact with any ninja, all I get are rumors." "Well, I won't confirm or deny those rumors," Naruto said, leaning against the table. "That's not what I'm here to talk about. You see, I'm from Konoha, and with the recent invasion Hokage-sama has realized that we're going to need help. Not just to repair our home, but also to help prevent something like this from happening again." He then looked at her and asked, "You have heard of the invasion, right?" Shizen nodded. "I don't know much, but I heard Konoha managed to repel an invasion force during the Chunin Exams." "That is basically what happened," Naruto said. "In truth, it's a bit more complicated than that. You see, Tsunade's old teammate, Orochimaru, was the one who planned out the invasion. Shizen wondered if the surprises would never cease as her eyes widened yet again. The man seemed to notice her look because he smiled. It's not so shocking when you think about it. We all know he hated Konoha, and wouldn't pass up a chance to destroy it. Anyways, we not only managed to repel his forces, we also managed to kill Orochimaru himself. Orochimaru was actually killed? Said Shizen in shock. She didn't honestly know much about Orochimaru, and had only met him a few times. But the man had never felt human to her, and Shizen had known that he was powerful. Tsunade had always commented on how he would likely be the last Sannin to die when she was drunk and reminiscing about the past. Yes, Naruto said. But back to my original intent. I was sent by the Hokage to bring Tsunade back to village. It's his hope that she will start the medical ninja program she had been hoping for during the Second Great War, but never got to create due to the funds it would take from the war. She's not going to want to return, Shizen said, shaking her head. Konoha holds too many bad memories and pain due to the loss of her little brother, Nawaki, and her lover, Dan, Naruto interrupted, getting Shizen to click her mouth shut. Don't act so surprised, her reasons for leaving aren't any kind of well-kept secret. And Sannin-sama was her sensei. Shizen had to concede that Naruto had a point. It wasn't as if Tsunade had made her leaving a secret. In fact, there had been a large scandal when she had informed Sarutobi she was leaving. The council had been in an uproar over it, claiming that she was forsaking her heritage. Had it not been for the fact that the Sandaime was such a kind-hearted man and let her go, she was sure Tsunade would have already been marked a missing ninja. Yes, that is true. I guess I should have realized you would know about her past, Shizen said. And that's why you should know that Tsunade will never willingly return to the village. And what about you? Asked Naruto, changing tactics and startling Shizen with the question. Do you ever miss Konoha? Ever want to go back? What I want doesn't matter, Shizen said. I've pledged myself to Tsunade-sama. Because she's the sole link to your uncle, Naruto stated, not as a question but as a fact. Despite having realized he likely knew a lot about her and Tsunade, Shizen was still surprised by the amount of information he had on them. And what about Konoha? Didn't you uncle want to be Hokage? Wasn't it his dream to protect Konoha? Does it not have the same link to your uncle that Tsunade does? Shizen didn't answer, mainly because she really wasn't sure she had one. Regardless of whether she had an answer to Naruto's questions or not, the blonde continued. Are you really so devoted to Tsunade that you would disregard your own wishes? Do you mean so little to yourself? There was a small pause. Naruto left her, in case Shizen had something to say. However, she didn't, and so he began speaking again. I doubt you really care for her that much anyways. What? Shizen shouted as she stood up simply so she could glare down at the man. She had always been rather level-headed, having to take care of Tsunade meant she was always the responsible one, always the one placing limitations on what her mentor could do, how much she could spend on sake and gambling. Even though Tsunade rarely ever listened to her. She had never really gotten angry before. Annoyed? A few times. Moving from place to place wasn't the best way to live, and she didn't like it when Tsunade would gamble all of her money away and they would have to run before the debt collectors came. Earning what money they could by doing odd jobs that required medical expertise, only for Tsunade to once more spend it all on drinks and gambling. Having to deal with that for over 2 decades did annoy her, but she had never truly gotten angry. However, that this man would insult her devotion to the person she had dedicated her life to serving angered her. How dare you? Shizen hissed. I have devoted my entire life to helping Tsunade-sama through the pain she's been in. I've taken care of her for over 2 decades. My entire life has revolved around how am I taking care of Tsunade-sama. How dare you say such a thing to me? If you're so devoted to her, then why are you letting her wallow in her own guilt and misery? Asked Naruto. It wasn't just the question that caused Shizen to lose her anger, it was also the calm tone he had spoken it in. With the question asked, Shizen couldn't help but wonder, was that what she was doing? Was she just allowing Tsunade to stew in her misery? To gamble away everything she had, her entire ancestors' fortune because simply having it brought her pain? The though actually made Shizen wonder if she had really done Tsunade any good by being too soft on the woman. Her hesitation did not go unnoticed as Naruto spoke again. You've let Tsunade run from one side of the country to the next, spending her family fortune on gambling and alcohol. You let her wallow in her grief and stew in her own misery. You let her drink away her problems rather than help her confront them and move on. From what I've seen observing the woman the past few days, Tsunade's nothing more than a shell of her former self. That's not true, Shizen whispered, but there was no conviction in it. Naruto was right, she hadn't truly helped Tsunade. When they had first left Konoha, she had assumed Tsunade would just need some time to recover from her loss. Even Shizen had managed to move on past the loss of her uncle, and she had thought it wouldn't be any different for Tsunade. But 1 year turned into 2, then 2 into 3, and soon she found herself taking care of her mentor. For over 20 years she had watched Tsunade drink and gamble her family fortune away, listened to her cry in her sleep after a night of drinking so much sake Shizen had been forced to drag the woman to their hotel. In all the years they had been on the run, Tsunade had never confronted her past, never even tried to move past it. She just continued her current lifestyle, hoping to outrun it. Help me bring Tsunade back. At Naruto's words Shizen wiped the tears that began accumulating in her eyes off on her sleeve and looked up. You know what she's doing isn't healthy. Running from your pain never is. Help her heal by convincing her to confront her past. Okay. Shizen's answer wasn't that hard, now that she thought about it. She hadn't been doing Tsunade any favors by letting her run from her pain. She wouldn't do that anymore. Shizen would help her mentor confront her past, and get her to move on. And maybe in doing so, they would finally be able to go home. That would be nice. Flashback end. I see. Tsunade said as she sipped her tea. I can't believe you managed to let this idiot convince you into taking me back, Shizen. I didn't convince her of anything, Naruto said before Shizen had a chance to defend herself. All I did was make her realize that helping you run from your problems would never heal the sorrow you feel. What do you know about sorrow, you brat? Tsunade asked rather angrily. She slammed her teacup into the table, shattering it and the table underneath it. You know nothing of the pain I feel. The pain of losing the people you love most. So don't talk to me about healing my pain, because you know nothing about it, you little. Tsunade's words were cut off mid-sentence as Naruto's killing intent flooded the room. It was cloying and so potent that everyone inside fell to the floor, gasping for breath. Looking up, Tsunade saw Naruto glaring at her, his eyes no longer just the blue color she had come to associate with him, they now held the ripple pattern she knew of only in legends. The Rinnegan. The silver rings were glowing with an inner light, and his hair seemed to sway in an invisible breeze, as if it had a life of its own. And right behind was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen, the vision of a demon with clawed hands, glowing red eyes and a maniacal grin on its face. She tried to speak or scream or anything but no words would come out. Not even a sound. I want you to listen to me, Senju Tsunade, Naruto said, his voice once again taking on a demonic quality as he was using his Yuki to enhance the power behind his killing intent. It wasn't as powerful as it could be. Naruto did not want to alert the entire town to his power, or anyone else that might be around and spying on them. Nor did he want to kill the people in the room with him. But he would get his point across to this woman, and if he had to bring her to the floor to do so then he would. I know more about pain and suffering than you ever will. So you lost your little brother and lover. Boo-hoo. It was war, and the inescapable truth is that people die in war. Maybe I can't compare my suffering to yours, since both of my parents died only an hour after I was born, sacrificing their lives so I could live. But I do understand what it means to be alone, to have no one there for you, to be unloved, unwanted. I understand pain much better than you ever could. However, you don't see me wallowing in guilt and self-pity. Your lover and brother died doing what they wanted, protecting Konoha with their lives, just as the Hokage would. That was their dream after all. And for you to just run away from the place they sacrificed their lives for is like spitting on all they had worked towards. Perhaps that's okay with you though. Maybe you don't actually care about Nawaki or Dan, because if you did, then you wouldn't be such a pathetic shell of your former self. Wallowing in self-pity, getting drunk to escape the past, gambling away the hard-earned fortune of your clan. Yes, they must be so proud of you. You, Senju Tsunade, are a disgrace to the Senju clan name. And just like that the killing intent stopped after Naruto's tirade. However, Tsunade found she couldn't keep her eyes from leaving Naruto's Rinnegan ones. Know this, Tsunade, Naruto said, his voice no longer the regal and demonic growl it had been, though the quality it held now was no less deadly. I personally don't care what you want. If you run, I will find you. If you fight, I will kick your ass and drag you back to the village by your hair. And before you think you can beat me in combat, know that I was the one who killed Orochimaru. Not Sannin-sama. Tsunade's eyes widened, not just at the words but at the fact that she could see he was not lying. She could see in his eyes that he had killed Orochimaru, her former teammate and the one who had been the strongest back when they were still a team. She didn't really know what to think of that. Orochimaru was a jerk, and as vile as they came, but he was still her former teammate. They had a bond that hadn't gone away just because he had gone missing ninja. Naruto didn't know of her thoughts, and if he had he wouldn't have cared. Now, I will give you until tomorrow to think all this over. Should you come willingly, the Hokage has offered to pay off all of your debts and will give you the opportunity to begin the medical ninja program you had been wanting before you left. I would suggest not trying to sneak out, as I will be having several dozen Kage Bunshin patrolling the area, along with the Himura Senkyodai. So I will know if you try to leave, and I have no trouble going through on my threats. A little harsh, don't you think? Asked Hana as Naruto left the room. He had her and the others standing guard outside and around the building just in case other countries or the Akatsuki tried spying on them. It may be a little paranoid, but Naruto felt it was a nice added precaution. No, Naruto said plainly. She needed a good kick in the ass to get moving again. As things are now, Tsunade may be living, but she's no longer alive. Hana blinked in confusion at that statement, but didn't ask him to clarify, figuring some of the strange things he said was just a weird Naruto quirk. So what was with that voice thing? Asked Hana, getting Naruto to look at her. You know, that growly voice thing you did, you like it? Asked Naruto with a grin. Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to tell you. He cupped his mouth and leaned in, forcing Hana to do the same. When his hand was right next to her ear he whispered, "It's a secret." Hana face faulted and Naruto laughed as he began moving to his room. She got up and rubbed her face before glaring at the blonde, but he just gave her a cheeky grin and said, "We'll be leaving tomorrow, so make sure you get some rest." And with that he went inside of the hotel room he had gotten for himself, leaving Hana outside to grumble about cryptic blondes. The next morning Tsunade got up at fairly early, especially for her. As she went through her daily routine of getting showered and dressed, her mind went over the events of last night. Naruto's anger and killing intent had been so palpable she could almost taste it. Truth be told, the sheer amount of killing intent she had felt coming from the blonde had been frightening. The way that odd red energy had seemed to pour out of him, the way it had actually burned her skin. It had been like a physical manifestation of his anger at her. Surprisingly was that though Shizen had been affected by the killing intent, the energy had not burned her. Tsunade couldn't help but wonder if Naruto had been protecting the younger woman from his anger. She looked down at her arms. She had healed the burns last night, once she had gotten her shaking under control. But even still, just looking at them she could almost see the angry red burn marks that had marred her skin. It had surprised her when she did, because the burns had actually come from an advanced form of chakra poisoning. Naruto's chakra, which was what she called it for lack of a better word because as far as she was concerned it was not chakra, had been so potent that when it touched her skin it had burned her. It made her ask how Naruto had been able to protect Shizen from not getting burnt as well. Maybe I can't compare my suffering to yours, since both of my parents died only an hour after I was born, sacrificing their lives so I could live. But I do understand what it means to be alone, to have no one there for you, to be unloved, unwanted. I understand pain much better than you ever could. Tsunade's mind recalled the blonde man's words, and couldn't help but wonder about them. She knew who he was, at least somewhat. Tsunade had not been in Konoha during the Kyuubi attack, she had left nearly a decade before that. But she had known both of the young man's parents. It was a surprise to know that he apparently knew them as well, or perhaps he was parroting something Sarutobi had said to him, though Tsunade doubted it. The words he had used to tell her about his parents giving their life for him had held a certainty to it. He had known how they died, or at least had some clue. She was sure he knew who his parents were, though that did make her wonder about his other words. How he was alone and unwanted. It was unlikely the rest of Konoha knew of his heritage, but that wouldn't explain his words. So what was he talking about? How he had no parents? Or was it something else? She had seen the look in his eyes, the look of someone that had been scorned for most of his life, of anguish and loneliness. They say the eyes are the windows to the human soul, and that was true. You could have the best damn poker face in the world, but you could never hide emotions from your eyes. So what did his eyes mean? Thinking of the blonde's words made her remember the rest of what he said. How she had essentially spit on the graves of her lover and younger brother. Was that true? Sure, they had wanted to be Hokage, but they died for that title and Konoha. Why should she have to suffer in that place after it took the two people who meant the most to her? Yet even as those thoughts came to her, she felt ashamed. Dan and Nawaki had loved Konoha, so much so that they were willing to give their lives. If she thought about it then Konoha was their last living legacy in a way. Getting out of the shower and dispelling her thoughts as she was beginning to run in circles, Tsunade dried herself off and walked into her bedroom to get dressed. Shizen had already woken up, and was likely downstairs. Once she finished putting her clothes on, she stepped out of her room and walked downstairs into the main lobby. The main lobby of the hotel was segregated into 3 parts, the front desk, a sitting room, and a small restaurant where they were currently having a breakfast buffet. Tsunade walked into the restaurant and looked around. She saw Hana drinking some tea and eating some kind of breakfast platter. Her 3 ninken were sitting under the table eating something as well, likely much to the hotel owner's displeasure. Shikamaru was also there, his head on the table, his eyes closed and a small string of drool hanging out of his mouth. Likewise, Shino was up, quietly reading what looked like a newspaper of some kind. But there was no Shizen. Hana noticed her as she walked further into the lobby, because she stood up in deference. "Tsunade-sama, good morning," she said. "Is there anything I can get you?" Not one to turn down such an offer, Tsunade said, "Some sake if you could." By Hana's raised eyebrow, she was likely questioning her sanity for wanting to drink alcohol so early in the morning. Tsunade shrugged. "I can't wake up without my morning sake." The Inuzuka still looked unconvinced, but hailed a waiter and asked for some sake. By the looks of the waiter, he was questioning Hana's sanity but went to do as asked. "Have you seen Shizen anywhere?" asked Tsunade after she got a plate and filled it with an assortment of breakfast foods. "No," Hana replied. "Naruto's not here either. He said that he wanted to spend some time enjoying the sights before leaving," Shino supplied helpfully from where he sat. "Shizen-san woke up half an hour after he did and asked if I had seen him. She is likely with him right now." Tsunade thought about going to find them both, but decided against it. She still felt she needed time to sort everything out and didn't want to talk to Naruto yet. And Shizen could take of herself, she was the responsible one out of the two of them. She would come back in her own time. Naruto sat on the wall that surrounded the large castle, his arms behind him as he leaned back and used them as support. To many who saw him, they would assume he was admiring the castle, like every other tourist. However, were they to look into the lightly glazed eyes, they would realize he wasn't looking at anything. In truth, it would be more accurate to say he was looking through it. The reality was Naruto's thoughts and attention were focused inward, remembering the night before when he had blown up on Tsunade. While he had expected anger in how a woman of such power and status would degrade herself and spit on the graves of her ancestors, he had not expected so much. Were he honest with himself, he would admit to having felt the temptation to kill that shell of a woman for her ignorant words. Yet even then he knew that his anger did not come from Tsunade, or at least not solely from her. While he would never admit it out loud, Naruto still held a lot of anger for the villagers of Konoha and their treatment of him, both before the Oto invasion and now. He hated how they had treated him, isolated him, and on occasion beaten him. But now that he was the son of the great Yondaime-sama, people were waiting in line just to kiss his ass, much like they had for Sasuke. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say he hated how they had changed their tune just because of his father. They reminded him of an old saying he had once heard, though he forgot from who. A person is intelligent, but people are stupid. The villagers of Konoha, all people, were like sheep. They followed the herd. If someone said a child had a demon sealed inside of him and therefore was a demon, then everyone would believe them without question. They wouldn't even take the time to confirm or at least withhold judgment. It was also true for the opposite reaction. Naruto was the perfect example, vilified demon one minute, son of the Yondaime and hero of the village another. The only real consolation he had was that the shinobi of the village had finally begun to respect him, not for who he was, but for what he had done during the invasion. And even that wasn't much of a consolation to him. Despite the words he told his father, about becoming Hokage and changing the village to what it used to be during the Shodai's time, Naruto sometimes found himself wondering, did he really want to bother helping the village after what they had done to him? True, he respected the Hokages, each one had something about them that he admired greatly, but was it enough to keep him there? Even though he had plans, and needed to be in control of a hidden village, he was not sure he wanted it to be Konoha. Though even he realized that the chances of gaining control of another village were slim to none, he closed his eyes and sighed as he realized how complicated life really was. Sometimes he felt it would have been simpler if he had just stayed an idiot. Yeah, like I would enjoy life even half as much now as I did then, he said with a mirthless chuckle. Naruto-san. Naruto opened his eyes just in time to see Shizen jump onto the roof of the wall right next to him. Can I help you, Shizen-san? Asked Naruto, closing his eyes again. I wanted to ask if you were alright? Asked Shizen. Naruto opened his eyes again to look at her curiously. She seemed to notice his look, because she went on further to explain. You just seemed so enraged last night. Truthfully, I was kind of frightened. Sorry, Naruto said, his words soft. He was honestly sorry. Shizen had not done or said anything wrong, Tsunade had. But even though he had protected the younger woman from his Yuki, he had not been able to shield her from his killing intent. I guess I lost control of myself last night after what Tsunade said. But I'm fine now. I appreciate your concern. Oh, okay, Shizen sat down next to him. So what are you doing out here? Just enjoying my time here before we leave, Naruto said. Has Tsunade made her choice on what to do? I think she's going to go back to Konoha. Good, Naruto grunted, sitting back up. I would hate to have to beat the crap out of her and forcibly take her back. He was about to stand up when his instincts screamed at him that danger was coming in fast. Reacting on instinct, Naruto grabbed Shizen and used his impressive speed to get away from the wall just as it blew up. A large gout of flame shot into the air, along with the debris that had formerly been a wall. Naruto looked at the smoke now being emitted thanks to the explosion. Keeping his eyes sharp, he took them off of the wall and looked around. Frowning, he began channeling Yuki and chakra into his eyes. When he had first used the Kage Bunshin training method, the first thing Naruto had realized was that thanks to his Rinnegan, creating massive amounts of Kage Bunshin would fry his brain via information overload worse than several thousand Kage Bunshin dispelling at once. This was because the Rinnegan allowed Naruto to see through the eyes of his clones, and while one or two may not be so bad, looking through the eyes of 5,000 clones was the single most painful thing Naruto had ever felt. In order to combat it, Naruto, with the help of Kyuubi, had managed to create a seal, located on each temple, that helped him turn off the Rinnegan by keeping his Yuki and chakra blocked once he pulled the energy back from his eyes. He preferred keeping them on, mainly because it was more comfortable. Natural feeling, he guessed, would be a good word. But knew that when trying to blend in, his eyes would stand out like a sore thumb. By channeling a combination of his demonic and human energies, Naruto deactivated the seals that kept his eyes unlocked. His pupil became a light silver color, while the blue of his irises began to spread into his sclera. At specific points where the blue spread, a silver ring would appear until his entire sclera was a deep blue color. With his Rinnegan active, Naruto could see the pure chakra of everyone around him, and the greenish-yellow chakra of the plants. He could see Shizen next to him. Her chakra was a light green with purple and red mixed in, letting him instinctively know that she knew medical jutsu, lime green, used poison jutsu, purple, and had a fire-natured chakra, red. Around him he picked up 6 other energy signatures. 2 were to his left, hiding up on the castle. 1 had a red chakra, letting him know that person was a fire user, while the other had brown, signifying him as a earth user. To his right and slightly behind him were 2 other chakra signatures. Both were brown. And slightly in front of him, hidden in a tree, was another chakra signature. This one was different. He could sense 4 different signatures: brown for earth, red for fire, and blue for water. He could also sense the 3 mixing to create orange, meaning she had a Kekii Genkai for lava. The last figure was directly below him, with brown-colored chakra. Grabbing Shizen once again, Naruto jumped into the air just as several earth spikes shot out of the ground. He landed on the roof of another wall. This one was several meters from his original position, and held out his hands towards where the signature that had shot the earth spikes were. Shinra Tensei. The unseen gravity attack was sent directly at the ninja who had sent the earth spikes. Even had the ninja known what was about to happen, there was nothing they could have done as the jutsu struck. The effects were instantaneous. The ground cracked in craters, and the man who was under the assault was completely crushed by the jutsu pressuring the ground he was below. Blood began to seep through the cracks and Naruto saw the chakra signature flat line and disappear. It seems the others realized what had happened as well because Naruto was attacked in several different directions by kunai. Looking at the kunai, Naruto could see that they all held explosive tags on them due to the small chakra they were emitting from having been ignited seconds before. Rather than let them get to him, Naruto channeled his human chakra and applied the same techniques he used for his Yuki to take direct control over it. Several balls of blue energy began forming on his fingers. Shizen, when I tell you to duck, duck, Naruto said, snapping Shizen out of her stupor as she looked from the balls of energy to his face. Ready, duck. She did so and Naruto spun around, launching ball after ball of blue chakra into the horde of kunai. Each ball struck a kunai, exploding on contact and taking the explosive tags and the kunai with them. Using the explosions they created as cover, Naruto made use of Shundo and appeared on the castle, directly behind the two chakra signatures he had seen. One was a kunoichi and one a shinobi. He could see from their headbands that they were from IWA, which immediately let him know why they were attacking him. Not one to waste time, Naruto speared the shinobi in the back, piercing not only his back but managed to nick his heart as well. It wasn't until the man noticed the hand sticking from his chest that he began screaming in pain. But even that died as Naruto pulled out and kicked his body off of the castle. The kunoichi had noticed him, but before she could do anything, Naruto grabbed her by the face and literally crushed it. Blood and gore leaked from the now crushed head and Naruto threw the corpse off the roof just like the other one. He looked down to see that Shizen had engaged two of the ninja left. She was doing pretty well for herself, so Naruto let her be, but created a Kage Bunshin to aid her just in case she needed help. Meanwhile, he appeared directly behind the still hiding figure. The person was a woman. She had short, black hair and pupilless pink eyes. She was wearing what seemed to be a long, red kimono with a sleeve on her left arm while the other sleeve on her right arm was missing, as well as the bottom left side of the kimono, the brown Iwagakure flak jacket, fishnet tights and a skirt over them. Naruto placed a hand on her head and felt the woman freeze up. What the hell? Ignoring her shouted question, Naruto asked, "Who are you? Why the hell do you think I would tell you that? Why can't I move?" Naruto would have smiled at how the girl was keeping cool. He could feel her fear, even if she wasn't showing it. To be honest, he was rather impressed. "You can't move because you are under the control of my jutsu, Kuratsuchi." He smiled as he sensed her surprise and shock, along with more fear. "Now, why are you trying to kill me?" I won't tell you," Kuratsuchi stuttered. "I see, you are here because Onoki found out I have the Rinnegan and am the son of Namikaze Minato. He sent you and your team here to kill me while I was away from the village and dispose of my body so no one would know IWA was involved." If his smile could have widened, it would have. He was sure this girl would lose control of her bladder soon with how terrified she was. "Your last two lackeys have just died, in case you wanted to know. And now you're all alone. I wonder, does your Tsuchikage think so little of you that he would send you on a suicide mission? How dare you insensate such a thing?" Kuratsuchi snarled. "I am one of the best jonin in Iwagakure. He sent me on this mission because I have the greatest chance of killing you. And I have the Rinnegan, killed Orochimaru and defeated a Jinchuriki in full demon mode on the same day," Naruto replied. "To come at me with anything less than several S-ranked ninja is suicide. Though I suppose he could just be overconfident. It would be just like you IWA ninja. So sure of yourselves, so stupid." Kuratsuchi opened her mouth to snap at him, but all she got out of was a pained gasp as Naruto squeezed her head. I don't want any of your snappish comments right now. I'm trying to think of what to do with you. I could kill you, but then all that would left as proof of this battle would be your corpses, and I have enough of those. What are you going to do?" "I haven't decided yet," Naruto said. Then he smashed her head into the tree trunk, knocking her out. "So I'll get back to you on that." Lifting the now unconscious girl on his shoulders, Naruto disappeared. Reappearing right next to Shizen, who nearly attacked him before seeing who he was. "Naruto-san. Are you alright?" she asked as she began looking over him for wounds. Naruto chuckled at her healer's nature and said, "I'm fine. I didn't even get a scratch on me." He looked around and frowned at the destruction. It wasn't bad, but it would take a while for anyone to repair it. "Can't say the same about this place." "Who's that?" asked Shizen, noticing the person over his shoulder. "This is Kuratsuchi, the granddaughter of the Sandaime Tsuchikage," Naruto said. As Shizen gaped, Naruto looked around, his Rinnegan eyes deactivating. Tsunade and the others are coming. Shizen looked over towards where he was looking to see Tsunade, Hana and her Ninken, Shikamaru and Shino all running towards her. Shizen! Tsunade said as she reached them. Are you alright? What happened? We heard the. She paused at seeing Kuratsuchi. Who is that? This is Kuratsuchi, an IWA Jonin sent to kill me, Naruto said brightly, causing Tsunade to sweat drop. Assassins? Asked Shikamaru. Apparently, Naruto said with a shrug. It seems the old goat in IWA found out about the Konoha invasion, my Rinnegan, and that my father's the Yondaime. He sent her and 5 others here to kill me. What happened to the others? Asked Shino. I buried them 6 feet under, Naruto said casually. Hey boss. Said the Naruto clone. The real Naruto turned to see a scroll being tossed to him. He caught it and the clone said, I sealed the bodies in that scroll. Excellent. Naruto said cheerfully. He turned to Tsunade, who was looking shocked and slightly fearful and asked, have you decided on whether or not you're coming to Konoha? Yes, I have, Tsunade said. I've decided to come with you. But don't get any bright ideas. This is only so I can escape my debts. Of course, Naruto said with a chuckle. He looked at his team. Are you 5 all ready to go? Yeah, we're all packed, you troublesome blonde, Shikamaru said. He looked at Kurotuski and raised an eyebrow. What are you going to do with her? Naruto gave the lazy shadow user a creepy smile as he said. Oh, she's just going to be my messenger girl. A week later, Iwagakure no Sato. Onoki was an old man with a triangular beard and a mustache with angular corners. He had a big red nose and thick rectangular-shaped eyebrows. The top of his head was completely bald, although, he did have a smattering of white hair at the back and sides of his head which faintly resembled an Akonmage-style haircut, the back of which was tied with a yellow ribbon into a topknot. Onoki's outfit consisted of a green and yellow coat with a red collar. Underneath that he wore an Iwagakure flak jacket. Currently he was sitting at his desk going through the bane of every Kage's existence, paperwork. He just didn't understand how he had so much of it, or how it kept piling up. His secretary had not entered the office for over an hour, and yet each time he finished his stack a new one would just appear in place of the old one. Maybe his secretary had created some kind of Jikuken paperwork transfer jutsu. Tsuchikage-sama. The door to his office burst open and Akatsuchi ran in. He was a large man with dark eyes and hair that spikes out at the back from underneath his forehead protector which he was wearing like a bandana. He also has big cheeks and a plump nose. He wore the red double-sleeved Iwagakure uniform underneath his flak jacket in addition to a yellow scarf that adorned his neck. Is there a reason you just barged in here, Akatsuchi? Asked Onoki, huffing in annoyance at being interrupted. I swear, kids these days have no respect for their elders these days. It's Kuratsuchi. Akatsuchi said frantically. She just got back. I see. The tone in Onoki's voice made it very obvious that he did not see what the big deal was. Maybe I'd better explain, Akatsuchi mumbled. Kuratsuchi returned, but her team did not. She was found outside the gate just a few minutes ago nearly comatose. She didn't tell us much when she woke up, but from what I understand she had been taken captive and then let go to deliver us a message. So, she failed to kill the Namikaze boy, Onoki said in disappointment. He had hoped that Kuratsuchi would be able to kill the boy before he became a threat to their village. It was bad enough the child was the son of Minato, but if rumors were true he also had the legendary Rinnegan and had defeated Orochimaru. If given more time to get stronger he could become a serious threat to the village. Standing up, Onoki walked around the desk. Take me to her. Hi, Tsuchikage-sama, Akatsuchi said as he led his Kage out of the tower. They made their way to a hospital and into the room where Kuratsuchi was lying on a bed. She was dressed in a standard patient's smock, and there didn't seem to be anything wrong with her physically. However, Onoki could see the way her eyes twitched around the room, as if paranoid about being watched. Kuratsuchi, your report, Onoki said, not really caring about her mental disposition. Kuratsuchi's eyes widened as she looked at Onoki. We failed, Tsuchikage-sama, she managed to stutter out. Obviously, Onoki replied, resisting the urge to roll his eyes. My team and we managed to find them leaving Oto Fujingai after a large battle took place. We didn't get there in time, so we didn't find out who fought. It was decided that we would keep our distance until we could get the Namikaze boy alone. However, he kept looking at us with those eyes, like he knew we were there and just didn't say anything. What eyes? Kuratsuchi shook her head. I don't know. The entire eye was dark blue and had a silver ripple-like pattern. The description except for the color matches the Rinnegan, Onoki said with a frown. What did the color difference mean? Was this some new variation of Rinnegan? He looked back at Kuratsuchi. What happened? We kept our distance after that, only sending one person in to keep an eye on him, she said. He and his team ran into Tsunade. We didn't know what he wanted with her, but felt it would be best if we didn't attack with a Sannin there. A prudent move, Onoki conceded. Continue. We managed to get him alone and were getting in position to kill him when a girl that had been with Tsunade showed up. They began talking, and we realized this was our last chance to kill him. So we attacked. And failed. Kuratsuchi winced. He was so strong. He avoided our attacks like they were nothing and used some kind of odd wind technique or something to crush one of my squad members. He and the girl managed to kill the others. Then he came up behind me and before I knew what he was doing he put his hand on my head. Onoki noticed the girl shiver and frowned. And, I couldn't move after that. I tried, but it was like my whole body was paralyzed. Then he started asking me questions. I didn't answer of course, but it didn't seem to matter. No matter how many times I told him off he would seem to know the answer, it was like he was reading me mind. And what did he learn? Asked Onoki. Everything. Kuratsuchi whispered. Everything I knew about Iwagakure he learned. Even when I just stopped talking all he had to do was put his hand on my head and ask me a question and he would learn it. Onoki's eyes widened. If the Namikaze child knew about everything about his village that Kuratsuchi knew, then he could easily cripple their village. The boy would have an entire blueprint of Iwagakure, including all of the hidden caves, bunkers and escape routes. He would know the general numbers of his forces, and he would even know the skills of some of his ninja. The worst part was that there was nothing they could do now. There was no doubt Iwa's attack on Naruto would be reported to Minato, who had taken up the position of Hokage once again. Onoki wasn't foolish enough to make another act against the man that had literally decimated his forces alone in the last war. There wasn't much he could do other than wait for the inevitable response that would come from Konoha. Toshikage-sama, Kuratsuchi's voice brought him out of his thoughts. He looked over at her and she said, "There's a letter in my flak jacket. He put it in there for you to read." Onoki frowned as he saw the flak jacket in question on the nightstand. He went over to it and found the letter mentioned inside of the second front pocket on the left. It was nothing more than a crumpled sheet of paper, but it was what was on it that had caught his attention. It read, "Dear old man. Your little assassination attempt failed. I would suggest not trying to place all the blame of poor Kuratsuchi-chan. I happen to have a very good method of interrogation and know that you are the one who gave her the orders. You should expect a letter for you from the Hokage once I get back to Konoha. I leave you now with a warning. I spared your granddaughter as an act of mercy. The next time you send her I will return her head to you. Best regards. Uzumaki Naruto-kun. P.S. I killed the others you sent. Their headbands are located in a storage seal at the bottom of this letter. P.S.S. Next time you want to kill me you should send more men, or hire that Akatsuki group you're so fond of using. What should we do, Toshikage-sama?" asked Akatsuchi, his voice quaking a little as he thought of what this failed mission meant. "There is nothing we can do," Onoki said with a deep breath being blown out of his mouth. "The assassination failed, all we can do is wait for Konoha's response." Those words did not reassure Akatsuchi, but there really was nothing they could do. They had failed, and now would suffer the consequences. Walking into Konoha was a beautiful and young fair-skinned woman of tall stature and curvaceous build with a large bust. She has blue eyes and straight blonde hair framing her face with a shorter cut in the back and the front bangs reaching her shoulders. She had a very expressionless look on her face as she ignored the way the two Chunin guarding the gate stared at her bust and gave him her passport. The man looked it over before allowing her to enter. "Okay, everything checks out, Samui-san. I hope you enjoy your stay here in Konoha," the man said as she walked off, and she knew from instinct that he would be looking at her ass now. However, she ignored that in favor of finding a place to live. Chapter 17, Work with what you've got. It was an early morning in Konoha, the sun was just beginning to rise over the trees to the east. The The sky was being painted in rays of orange and yellows, and the trees looked like they had been lit on fire. A light breeze was rustling through the waking village, making those same trees sway and caused several leaves to fall from their branches. Bird songs rang out in a beautiful melody that could ease anyone who heard them. Uzumaki Naruto woke up as the sunlight streamed in through the window of the bedroom in his new house. Opening his eyes, Naruto smiled as the first thing he saw was the red hair of Kyuubi. Ever since he had gotten back from his mission, the two of them had spent every waking minute he had not been training or spending time with his father in the village with each other. They didn't just have sex either, though a large majority of their time were spent in the throes of passion and pleasure of the flesh. They had been spending time together in a way that couples did, watching movies, cuddling by the fireplace. They had even gone on a few picnics, one of which was in a secluded part of Konoha's forest, though that particular date had ended with them making love. Not that Naruto would complain about being intimate with such a beautiful woman. Though Minato did have some choice words for Naruto's decision at not informing him of the specifics of his and Kyuubi's relationship, the fact that the older blonde had ranted on his Kage Bunshin notwithstanding. Needless to say, Minato had not been too pleased at first to know that Naruto was in an intimate relationship with the Kyuubi no Yoko, and it had actually been the cause of their first father-slash-son argument. Naruto had made it perfectly clear to the man that he was an adult, not just because he was wearing a Konoha headband, but also because he had grown up faster than everyone else his age. He was not in need of mothering, or fathering as it were. Naruto was long since the past of actually needing a father. While Minato had not liked that, he had been forced to concede the point. Though he did make it perfectly clear that while he wouldn't say anything, he did not approve of Naruto's relationship with Kyuubi. Which was fine with Naruto, truth be told. While he respected his dad, he didn't really care about the man's opinion on his love life. Shifting his body so that he was laying on his side, Naruto moved slightly out of Kyuubi's grasp so he could be face to face with her. Her breathing was slow, letting Naruto know she was asleep, and her mouth was lightly parted in a cute yet serene expression. Finding the look irresistible, Naruto leaned in and kissed her directly on the lips. She began to stir and he kissed her again, and again until she woke up fully and began kissing him back. "Good morning," Naruto said, grinning at her slightly glazed expression Kyuubi had once he pulled back. "Time to get up." "Right," Kyuubi said with a loud yawn. Getting out of bed, Kyuubi stretched her arms over her head, an act which pushed her breasts out further due to how firm they were. Naruto didn't bother with discreet looks as he took in the sight of her full and firm breasts, his gaze going to her light pink nipples and areola, which were looking a little hard. She and Naruto never bothered sleeping with their clothes on since they had sex every night for the past week since he had been back from his mission to return Tsunade to Konoha. Currently she was in her hybrid form, letting her 9 tails free, much to her relief. When she was done stretching, she turned her face towards him and asked with a grin, "Are you going to help me get clean?" Giving the vixen a grin of his own, Naruto bounded out of bed and strode over to her, scooping her up into his arms and moving towards the bathroom. Kyuubi giggled as she wrapped her arms around his neck and kicked her feet lightly. "Shower or bath?" he asked as they entered the room. "Shower," Kyuubi said after a moment's thought. Having received his answer, Naruto stepped into the shower and set Kyuubi on her feet. He turned the shower faucet and sighed contently as he instantly felt the warm water hit his back. Thanks to the seals Minato had placed on the shower heads, no one had to worry about their water being cold if they didn't want to. The seal was designed to activate with the faucet and channeled fire-natured chakra to heat the water as it left the shower head. It was a rather ingenious piece of work, one Naruto hoped to one day be capable of accomplishing similar feats with his Fuinjutsu. The two of them took their time washing each other, sneaking kisses that ranged from small pecks to long, drawn-out kisses that were hot enough to leave them both gasping for breath and blinking stars from their eyes. Though that was not all they did, especially when Naruto began washing the parts of her body that were more sensitive than others. Kyuubi closed her eyes as Naruto's soapy hands caressed and fondled her breasts. She leaned her back against his chest so he could have more reach, another reason also being so she could feel his member rub against the lips between her thighs, which were wet with a mixture of water and her own juices. As she felt Naruto pinch her nipples, she moaned again and asked, "Do you have any plans today?" "A few," Naruto said once he finished cleaning and playing with Kyuubi's breasts. His hands went down to her stomach and began rubbing and washing the skin there as he said, "I was thinking of spending time with some of the other jonin down at the Shinobi Bar and Grill." As the name suggested, the Shinobi Bar and Grill was a bar that catered specifically to ninja of Chunin level and higher. Genin could go there, but it was something of an unspoken law not to say anything until they reached a certain age. In that case I think I'll go to the hot springs for a while, Kyuubi said, though her breath hitched at the end as one of Naruto's hands slid in between her legs and began teasing the outer lips of her honeypot. Take Kin and Tayuya with you, okay? He requested, smiling a bit when Kyuubi began humping his hand. I know you still don't much care for humans, but not all of them are bad. It's just a matter of finding a gem among all the trash. I know, Kyuubi gasped as she felt herself release fluids onto Naruto's hand. Sagging against the blonde's muscled chest she sighed and said, I am trying to get along with humans. At least I find speaking with Enko, Kurenai and Hana to be enjoyable. Kyuubi had managed to build a small rampart with those three after Naruto introduced them. It was probably because the three weren't a bunch of unintelligent and hairless apes as his red-haired mate would put it. The trio of kunoichi were some of the few that actually took their jobs seriously and seemed capable of holding an intelligent conversation. Another person Kyuubi got along with was Senju Tsunade. Naruto had been a little surprised when the two of them had hit it off decently enough, considering his mate had been sealed inside of her grandmother. Though their companionship might have had something to do with their shared passion for alcohol. The only difference being the substances they drank, as Kyuubi enjoyed wine and Tsunade liked sake, but they seemed to enjoy debating the merits of which one of the drinks were better. It was an odd relationship, but one Naruto wasn't going to complain about, even if he still didn't respect Tsunade herself. And you have no idea how pleased I am to hear that, Naruto said. His arms went around her waist and pulled her closer to him, relishing in the feel of her body in his arms. No matter how many times they had done this and acts similar, the novelty of having someone he could be this intimate with hadn't worn off. Though I do wish you would expand your sphere of friends. And who would you suggest? Asked Kyuubi, before she gave a snort. Yamanaka the gossip queen Ino? Haruno the banshee Sakura? Or about Uchiha the spoiled brat from the clan I hate most Sasuke? The only members of your age group worth speaking to are Shikamaru, Shino and Choji, and one of them thinks it's too troublesome talking to your girlfriend, another doesn't talk at all or speaks one-word sentences, and the last one spends more time eating than talking. I suppose I could talk to Lee, but those eyebrows he and his sensei are sporting creeps me out, and that should be impossible. Niji, despite speaking about fate all the time, is still an asshole. And while Tenten seems decent, we like different things. She paused before grimacing, plus the last time we met she tried to grab my sword. Point taken, Naruto conceded with a chuckle, remembering that incident. It had been on their way back from a sparring match where Kyuubi had been helping Naruto with his kenjutsu. They had run into Tenten on the way back and the girl had fallen in love with Kyuubi's nodachi. The bun-haired weapons expert had asked Kyuubi if she could see her sword. Of course his mate said no. Anyone who touched that particular blade beside Kyuubi would suffer a fate far worse than death. Not even Naruto could safely touch it. However, the redhead's answer had not sat well with the girl and several times she had tried to steal Kyuubi's sword from her. It was getting to the point where the demoness was about ready to show the girl her sword by shoving it down her throat. Shaking the thoughts from his head, Naruto said, though you won't have to worry about Sasuke or Sakura. From what I hear, Sasuke is currently undergoing mental help with a psychologist, and Sakura isn't even a kunoichi anymore. He had heard about their dishonorable suspension after returning to the village. Sasuke had even had his Sharingan sealed, a fact he was sure burned the Uchiha something fierce. I'm spending some time with Kin as well, Kyuubi added. She's okay, though I think she may have a crush on me. Naruto snickered a little at that, partly because it might be true. He had caught the dark-haired girl staring at Kyuubi's breasts and ass several times in the last few days. Though I don't really like Tayuya. Her swearing problem, I know, Naruto said. He knew Tayuya's habit to swear and call people by derogatory nicknames pissed Kyuubi off. Naruto found it more amusing than anything, but he knew that Kyuubi would not be satisfied until Tayuya could stop cursing every other sentence. Unfortunately, the girl's mouth problem seemed to be more of a habit than anything else. That little issue will take a while for her to fix though. Doesn't make it any less annoying, Kyuubi muttered. Naruto kissed her on the back of the neck to soothe her agitation. They finished washing each other and Naruto turned off the shower. The pair got dressed and after giving Kyuubi another long kiss as goodbye left to go and spend some time with his peers. Minato was just finishing up his paperwork when a soft chime alerted him to his secretary calling. Pressing a button on the communicator he asked, "What is it?" I have some members of the council who want to call a meeting. Frowning, Minato asked, who? When he received the list of names, all members of the civilian council, his frown deepened. With Danzo no longer on the council and busy playing with his newfound restrictive freedom, a paradoxical position if there ever was one, and the two elders replaced, the civilian council had lost much of its power. However, they did still have some, and one of the things they could do was call a council meeting if a majority of its members agreed to. And unfortunately for him, over half of the civilian council had just been named. Very well, Minato said after several seconds. Get someone to inform the clan heads and tell the civilian council that the meeting will be in 1 hour. Of course, Hokage-sama. Minato turned off the communicator and frowned, his mind trying to deduce what the civilian council might want. There were many possibilities, and none of them very pleasant. Tsunade sighed as she relaxed into the hot water of the hot spring. It had been a week since she had come back to Konoha, and in that time period many things had happened. Her first surprise had been seeing that Sarutobi was not the one in charge. When she had first entered the Hokage's office and saw none other than Namikaze Minato sitting in the desk, working on paperwork as though he had never died, she had thought someone was playing some kind of prank on her. Or that she was trapped in a genjutsu. In fact, it had taken nearly 15 minutes to calm her and Shizen down, just enough to explain how he was alive again. Of course, learning that your old teammate had been stupid enough to summon someone who was claimed by the Shinigami was a bit of a shocker. Though it explained how Minato had come back. The specifics of the Edo Tensei were not known to many, and it was unlikely that Orochimaru had been able to do more than glance at the jutsu and learn how it was done. It was doubtful he even cared about certain aspects and limitations it might have. The man had never been one for caring about a jutsu's intricacies, merely about learning it. It was half the reason he was so into experimentation. He was always trying to come up with a shortcut to learning jutsu. After the initial shock at seeing someone who was dead, alive, Minato had given her the job he wanted her to do. The first was a complete overhaul of the hospital. Tsunade had been assigned as the chief medical ninja there, with Shizen as her second in command. The practices of the hospital had apparently gotten lazy since she had left and needed a sound kick in the rear to get back into shape. While she still had some reservations, fixing up the hospital was something she could take pleasure in, if for no other reason than she could show the rookies how everything was really done. Her second job once she finished fixing the hospital's medical practices was to begin launching her medical ninja program. During the Second War, after her little brother was killed, she had come to Sarutobi with this proposal, but it had been deemed too costly to start in the middle of the war. Tsunade could partially understand that since war cost a lot of money, and they had already been straining their coffers at the time. It had still angered her, especially because it was in many ways the reason her lover Dan had died. Now that she was being allowed to create the program she had wanted to for so long, she couldn't deny feeling a certain amount of pleasure. While she may have left Konoha because of the pain being there caused, she had never forgotten her oath as a medical ninja, and being able to create a program that would help save lives was always something she had been hoping to do. Her first plan was to look up information on all of the promising genin and chunin of the village to see who had the best capabilities for becoming a medical ninja. She wanted those squads that were already in the field to have medics who could heal them when injured. After that, she would look at those students in their last 2 years at the academy. It was her hope that if she could start training people early, they would have more skilled medics ready to start off as genin. That would mean by the time they reached chunin, the medics would have enough experience to begin working on major operations at the hospital. The problem was figuring out who was best suited for being a medical ninja. To be a medic, one had to have near-perfect chakra control, even better control than a genjutsu specialist. They also had to be fast and skilled at dodging. A medic was never a frontline soldier, they were healers and as such needed to avoid taking damage so they could heal the members of their squad. The other problem was figuring out the best way to train them. Tsunade doubted she would have more than maybe 15 students at any given time, but that still was too many people to give her personal attention to training. And the only person she felt was qualified to teach beside her was Shizen. Her attention was taken from her thoughts as the door to the changing room slid open. Looking up, she saw Kit, Kin and Tayuya walk in. She knew Kin and Tayuya, of course. Sarutobi had convinced Minato to trust her with the knowledge that they were missing ninja from Oto who defected after Orochimaru died. Both were proclaimed Kia in the Konoha database, and the two of them wore a basic disguise to hide themselves among Konoha's population until they were ready to do whatever it was Minato planned on having them do. Kit was something of a mystery. She got along with the woman decently enough, both being lovers of alcohol, but she knew very little about her otherwise. The red-haired beauty tended to keep her past to herself and rarely interacted with anyone other than Naruto. The only thing Tsunade knew was that she was Naruto's lover, and that for some reason Minato didn't really like her. It was an odd thing considering the woman's personality reminded her of an odd mixture of her grandmother Mito and Kushina. She had all the regal poise her grandmother had, yet at the same time she held a fiery temper that matched Kushina's. Either way they were welcome company as Shizen was still working at the hospital. "Hello, Kit-san, Kin, Tayuya," Tsunade said. She held up a body of sake and looked at Kit with a raised eyebrow. She got a head shake no and shrugged, having already guessed that would be the answer. For some unfathomable reason Kit preferred wine to sake, though Tsunade would understand why. "Tsunade-san," Kit said, giving her that regal nod she would expect from her grandmother. The redhead moved deeper into the water and sat down next to Tsunade. Kin and Tayuya offered their own greetings as they too sat close by. "This feels nice," Kin said, sighing as she sank into the water. "Fuck yeah it does," Tayuya agreed. "Tayuya, am I going to have a bar of soap down your throat again?" asked Kit in a sing-song voice that sent shivers of fear up the former redhead and current blonde's back. "And no," stuttered Tayuya, paling. She had already had 42 bars of soap shoved down her mouth this past week alone. Her mouth was so clean it squeaked when she talked. She didn't need it to be any cleaner. Tsunade had to admit that being impressed with the way Kit made a hard-ass kunoichi like Tayuya fear her merely by talking. "So how are you and Naruto?" she asked. Kit gave her a slightly lecherous grin. Having such a powerful and energetic lover is rather nice. Especially since he knows how to please a woman. With his unlimited stamina he usually puts me to sleep via exhaustion from amazing and passionate sex. Kin and Tayuya both blushed beet red, while Tsunade grunted. "I meant how are you two getting along, pervert? You're almost as bad as my teammate, Jiraiya." "Oh, well then you should have been more specific," Kit replied with a bright smile. Tsunade's eyes gained a slight twitch, already knowing the redhead was doing that to bother her. "And I am nothing like that lecher." She paused before continuing, "We're doing well, even though we've been together for nearly 2 months now, we're still learning something new about each other every day. I look forward to spending the rest of my life with him. Aren't you taking things a little fast?" asked Tsunade. "If you've only known him for 2 months then how do you know he's the one?" "Oh he is," Kit replied with a mysterious smile. "I know that for a fact. There can be no other." Her smile turned decidedly teasing as she added, "Besides, he's spoiled me for other men. I don't think I would be able to sleep with another guy without telling them how inadequate their performance is compared to Naruto-sama's." Tsunade grunted slightly, both at her statements and her title for Naruto. She still didn't know why Kit called him so respectfully. It wasn't like the brat was anything special, just another young upstart with a chip on his shoulder and a big name to live up to. Though even Tsunade had to acknowledge and respect the blonde's strength. Silence soon permeated the hot spring as everyone was left to their own thoughts. Tsunade's went to Naruto. There was just something about the blonde that made her slightly uneasy. It wasn't the kind she got when her ninja sense told her someone was dangerous, though she knew he was. It was more like he was hiding something from everyone, like the Naruto who presented himself to everyone was only one facet of the real Naruto. She couldn't really think of any way to describe her thoughts on her fellow blonde other than that. A burst of chakra had both Tsunade and Kit looking to the left, as a swirl of leaves appeared on top of the rocks. A female ANBU member with a cat mask and purple hair appeared in a bowed position before them. "I apologize for interrupting your relaxation, Tsunade-sama. However, the council has requested a meeting and all clan heads are to attend." A groan escaped Tsunade's lips at hearing the council wanted to hold a meeting. One of the unfortunate aspects of her returning was that Minato had forced the position of Senju clan head on her. Despite the fact that she was the last Senju, as the rest of her clan had been killed in the First and Second Ninja Wars, the Senju name still held a lot of weight within the village. They also had a hereditary seat on the council, thanks to the Senju being one of the founding clans of Konoha. "How much time do I have before the meeting starts?" asked Tsunade. "Half an hour. Right, I'll be there." The ANBU nodded and disappeared the same way she appeared, within a swirl of leaves. "That must suck having to be called away from your personal time because a bunch of cocksuckers with overinflated egos feel the need to bitch at you," Kit commented. "Ugh, don't even talk about them right now," Tsunade grumbled as she leaned back and closed her eyes. aren't you going to head to the meeting? No, Tsunade grunted, I'll go after I finish my sake. Kit snickered a little but Tsunade just ignored her in favor of drinking her alcohol. Anko, Kurenai and Hana were all sitting around in a booth at the Shinobi Bar and Grill, as was the usual with them. Many of the men stared but none approached. It had been a long time since any male actually had the guts to try and hit on them, especially when they were together. Between Kurenai's hatred of all things perverted, Anko's lust for blood and violence and Hana's feral demeanor towards anyone stupid enough to come near them when smelling like a walking pheromone, more than 90% of the male population were too afraid to come within a 10-meter radius of them. Hey waiter! Can we get some more dango and red bean soup over here? Anko shouted to one of the waiters that was passing somewhat near them. Though he was still far enough away to avoid their wrath should he be caught peeking on them. The waiter nodded and scurried off to get their order. Grinning happily, Anko said, I love the power that comes from fear. Hana rolled her eyes, of course you do, Anko. With all of the random acts of violence you commit upon the general populace, that doesn't surprise me. Speaking of violence, did I tell you about the sucker I got to interrogate a while ago? Said Anko. She pulled out a small slip of paper with a seal on it, a silencing seal, and stuck it to the underside of the table. Leaning in to speak she said, you know how Naruto-kun was attacked by those IWA ninja? Yes, Anko, I was there after all, Hana said. She had not been there at the time of the attack but she was on the mission and saw its aftermath. She was also the one who informed Anko about the attempted assassination. Outside of those who went on the mission, only Anko and Kurenai actually knew about it. The yondaime had been trying to keep the assassination quiet and broker some kind of deal to settle the attack on his son. It was a smart decision as people would be calling for Iwa's blood if it actually got out that there was an assassination attempt on the honorable son of the yondaime. An odd turnaround considering many of the people in Konoha would have cheered if Naruto were to die a few weeks ago. Yeah, Anko said, waving off her words. Anyways, a missing ninja was recently caught by our border patrol entering our territory. With the invasion and all, we've been stepping things up, so I guess it's understandable that he was caught so quickly. However, what's interesting is he was coming from the direction of Tsuchi no Kuni, Earth Country. You think IWA hired a missing ninja to scout our defenses? Asked Hana. Hokage-sama thinks it's a possibility, Anko said with a shrug. Personally, I think it's very likely. They know that can't be caught doing anything they shouldn't right now, especially as they're trying to broker a deal with Yondaime-sama to escape his wrath for their attempt on his son. At the same time, I'm sure Iwa's trying to find a weak point in our defenses so they can gain the upper hand in any bargaining that's to take place. Konoha and IWA had been at odds ever since the Third Great Shinobi War, in which Minato had destroyed most of their forces in a single battle. The hatred IWA gained from the loss of so many of their shinobi and kunoichi meant they were always looking for a way to plant spies within Konoha in order to find some weakness they could exploit. It was a never-ending battle of stealth reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance between the two great nations. They were stupid to even attempt killing Naruto-san in the first place, Hana said. I wasn't at the battle in Tanzaka-gai, but I heard from Shizen that he killed 4 of them and captured the 5th without getting so much as a scratch. And I saw him when he and his 2-san began fighting right after he finished killing off Orochimaru, Anko said. And that was after winning the entire Chunin exam. The kid's a fucking monster on the battlefield. I pity anyone who ends up getting orders to kill him. Hana nodded in agreement. Yeah, me too. So did you get any information from that missing ninja? No, Anko leaned back and pouted. He has some kind of seal on his tongue that prevents him from talking about certain things. Hokage-sama is looking into it, but he said it could take a few days before he cracked the sealing code used. Deciding to change the subject, she looked over at Kurenai and said, You've been silent ever since we got here, Nai-chan. Is something wrong? Kurenai sighed and sagged a little in her seat. Asuma and I are on the outs again. Having another lover's quarrel, Anko said. You and Asuma have been arguing a lot more recently, haven't you? This is the 5th time in 1 month that you've come in like this, though it's thankfully not as bad as the first time you and Asuma had a fight. Kurenai blushed a little at that. It had been when they first started dating in secret. Asuma had made a comment on woman that she had found derogatory and she had gone off on him. She didn't remember what she had said exactly, but knew it was insulting. Not one to take things from anyone, even his own father, Asuma had retaliating with some pretty terrible remarks about her frigid bitch personality. Later that night Kurenai had dragged Enko out and proceeded to get completely wasted, all the while crying about how it was over for her and Asum. That was a completely different circumstance, Kurenai defended. Sure, I know that, Enko said, holding her hands up in defense. The food and sake came a moment later and they paused in their conversation until the waiter had run off. All I'm saying is that maybe you and Asum just aren't meant for each other. Maybe, however, acknowledging that she and Asum might not make a good couple just seemed to depress her even more. Enko and Hana tried to cheer her up, an endeavor that was not proving very successful. During their attempt Enko looked up and into the crowd, before a grin broke out on her face at seeing familiar long and spiky locks. Naruto-kun! Enko shouted, catching the attention of her two female companions as she waved at the blonde. Naruto seemed to have noticed her as well, not that hard considering she was shouting his name and waving like a loon. He smiled before making his way over to the trio, much to the disgruntled muttering of the men who wondered how he had managed to get an in with 3 of the top 10 most desirable kunoichi in the village. Enko-chan, Hana-san, Kurenai-san, Naruto greeted as he sat down next to Enko. How are my 3 favorite kunoichi? Good! Enko said with cheer as she began digging into some dango again. As she grabbed another stick she held it out to Naruto. Want some? Sure, thank you, he said as he took the stick from her hand and began eating the dango slowly. The other two looked at each other knowingly, before Naruto spoke again. You alright, Kurenai-san? He asked, you look a little down. Is it that obvious? Asked Kurenai, seeming to wince at being so easily read. For those who are actually observative of their surroundings, yes, Naruto responded. And no, it's not obvious, you're actually disguising your emotions fairly well. But I lived in the red light district for 13 years, and you don't survive a place like that without being able to observe your surroundings carefully. Especially when you were a known Jinchuriki. He had to be especially careful because if he even ran into a single drunk, it would end in either him being beaten until that drunk was finished or passed out, or it would escalate to a small group beating that ended in the same way. Kurenai frowned at the mention of where he lived, but accepted the slightly unusual compliment to her skills at keeping her emotions hidden. If you don't mind me asking, may I know what has you so down? Before Kurenai could respond, Enko said, she and her boyfriend are fighting, again. Kurenai glared at Enko but Naruto surprised them both when he said, you mean Asuma, right? When the 3 kunoichi looked at him in shock he chuckled and asked, what? You don't think it was that well kept of a secret, do you? Asuma's female student is Yamanaka Ino, the gossip queen extraordinaire. With her on his team it was impossible for that information not to get out eventually. The 3 had to concede his point. Ino was a well-known gossip and had the loosest lips any of them had ever seen. Not a good thing for a kunoichi. Kurenai sighed as she began to explain her problem, thinking that maybe a male perspective could give her some advice. Asuma was talking about taking our relationship to the next level, she began. I told him I wasn't ready and he got mad at me. Oh, Enko muttered as Kurenai actually began making sniffing noises. That either the argument between her and Asum was really bad, or she was just drunk. Kurenai was a maudlin drunk so she would often become depressed after drinking too much. It was possibly a mixture of both as she hadn't had enough sake to get anything more than a light buzz. As Enko and Hana began rubbing Kurenai's back, Naruto said, so basically he wants you to put out but you don't feel ready to commit? Kurenai looked at him strangely, likely from his choice of words, but nodded nonetheless. And I'm guessing you don't want to take that last step until you're sure he's the one, right? This time her eyes actually widened as she nodded, surprised that he had already guessed her reasoning. And Asum probably didn't like that, being a hot-blooded male who cares more about sex than he does having a real relationship. I don't know about that, Kurenai said in Asuma's defense. He's usually really sweet most of the time. And yet he wants you to sleep with him before you're ready, Naruto pointed out. Even with all of the teasing he had given to Kyuubi during their training he would never have forced her to have sex with him unless she was ready. In his eyes it was dishonorable to force or con a girl into sleeping with you when she didn't want to. It was too close to rape in his opinion. Kurenai sniffed a bit as she conceded the point. True, she whispered. At this point Enko decided that Kurenai had enough to drink and replaced her sake with a glass of water, along with forcing her to eat something filling to help settle the alcohol currently in her. Do you want my advice? Asked Naruto. Kurenai turned to look at him and he continued, I won't give it to you unless you want it, but if you want to hear what I think you should do it could prove useful. Since I am coming at this from a male perspective and all. Kurenai seemed to think about it as her eyes glazed over slightly. They cleared a second later and she nodded. I think you should tell him to fuck himself, Naruto said. The reactions he got were amusing. Hana shoved a fist in her mouth to keep from laughing. Anko didn't bother to do even that as she snickered. However, Kurenai was wide-eyed and gaping at him. Trying not to laugh at their reactions, Naruto continued saying, or you could tell him that if he wanted a quick lay he should just go to a brothel. If you're not ready to take the next step, then you shouldn't, and if he can't respect your decision and be willing to wait until you are, then he's not worth your time. Or your sadness. Kurenai blinked at him several times, long enough that a still snickering Anko shut the raven-haired beauty's gaping jaw. After a few seconds Kurenai said, you know what, you're right. And just like that she seemed to gain a renewed fire in her eyes. If he can't be willing to wait for me, then he doesn't deserve to be with me. Thank you, Naruto-san. No need to thank me. I did this for my own peace of mind. You see, I have a hard time seeing such a beautiful woman sad, he said with an exaggerated wink, letting them know he was at least somewhat joking. It's in my nature to help them, or so Kit says. That was the false name he had made for Kyuubi. He didn't want people to know that the demon who had nearly destroyed their village was not only out of the seal but walking amongst them. Thanks to his father, they had even forged legal documents making her a citizen of Konoha so no one would know otherwise. Anko giggled a little, which would creep out most men as it usually meant she was on the verge of violence. Kurenai cracked a rare smile, and Hana just snickered a little. Even so, I appreciate the advice, Kurenai said, standing up. Now if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go find Asuma and give him a piece of my mind. As she walked out of the bar, Hana stood as well. And I'd better follow her just in case she gets in trouble. Hana waved goodbye to the two still sitting and left as well. It looks like we're alone, Anko said with a hum of thought. Relatively speaking anyways, Naruto added as they were still in a bar with several dozen if not 100 people. So what do you want to do now? Wanna go and help me destroy a training field? Anko grinned at the blonde. Are you asking me to help you cause mass amounts of damage and destruction? Yes. My Naruto-kun, you really know how to treat a girl. I do try, Naruto replied as the two of them stood up and paid for the food before heading off to destroy a training field. Minato entered the council chambers with a frown on his face. Most of the members were already sitting in their seats. The only person missing besides himself was Tsunade, and he had expected that. Sitting in their spots as his advisors were Jiraiya and Sarutobi, with Hayashi sitting in his clan's seat to fill the role of clan head. He was pleased to see his former sensei taking his job seriously. Minato was sure this had something to do with Naruto's threat of castration if he spent any time peeking in the hot springs that he could have spent helping the village. But so long as Jiraiya was working, Minato didn't care. Taking his seat, Minato said, it seems we're one short. However, just as he said that, Tsunade burst into the room. You're a tad late, Tsunadeheim, the yandame said, using her princess title since that was more or less what she was to the village. Yeah well, your ANBU caught me while I was in the hot springs, Tsunade grumbled as she moved to the Senju's seat. What? Jiraiya shouted in shock, before tears started falling from his eyes. You mean to tell me you were in the hot springs and I wasn't there? Jiraiya! I'm warning you, Tsunade said in a dangerous voice as she shook her fist in front of her face. Jiraiya paled at the implied threat, obviously remembering the last time he had peeked on her. If Minato remembered correctly, his sensei had nearly been killed, with 3 broken ribs, a punctured left lung, a broken arm, and shattered leg and a severe concussion. You can threaten Jiraiya-sensei after the meeting, Tsunadeheim, Minato said. Tsunade grumbled a little more, and only Tsum seemed capable of making out what was said as the woman snickered lightly. Minato couldn't hear it, but given Jiraiya's comments it was likely something about him and perverts and no doubt how they should all meet their violent end. Coughing into his hand, Minato turned to the civilian council and asked, now that we are all here, why don't get started? I believe there was a valid reason you called us all away from our duties. He let a slight edge seep into his tone, a reminder and a warning of what would happen should their reasons for calling a council meeting prove pointless. Only a few really seemed to understand the nature to his tone, and those were the ones who paled. The rest seemed oblivious to the subtle threat. Ahem, coughed the pink-haired council woman. Minato had learned that her name was Haruno Keiko. She was the mother of Naruto's former teammate Haruno Sakura, who had been given a discharge from his ninja forces for being unfit for duty. Keiko had also not been a member of the council until her husband, who had been the previous council member, died from a mysterious illness 5 years ago. Not much was known about the woman, but Minato had been able to find out that she held very radical beliefs in how things should be run. She was an extremist in every sense of the word. We of the Civilian Council first wanted to apologize to you, Yandem-sama, for the mistreatment of your Sochi. Minato had to admit that when the woman wanted she could sound very sincere. It was only his experience in reading people through their eyes that he could tell the woman didn't mean what she said. We hope that you will forgive us for our ignorance and fallibility. Minato took a moment before responding, letting the silence drag out as he bore a hole through Keiko's head. This had the effect of making her, and consequently those on the Civilian Council, very nervous. Had it not broken character, he would have smiled. While he may hate politics with a passion, he knew how to play the game as well as anyone else. Finally, after nearly a full 2 minutes, Minato spoke. I cannot accept your apology because I am not the one you should be apologizing to. If you are really sincere about your desire to repent, then you should offer up a formal apology to my Sochi, Naruto. He is the one you wronged after all. All you did to me was disregard my dying wish. He took a slightly perverse pleasure in the increased nervousness and fear he felt from the civilians. While Minato did not believe in killing for revenge, there were many other ways to hurt people that didn't involve violence. He already had a few plans in the works that he was working on. He hoped to accomplish them by the end of the year, and if he did, all of the current Civilian Council members would be left on the streets and penniless. Sometimes, hurting someone's pocketbook and village standing hurt far more than physical pain. We will of course offer Naruto-sama a formal apology at a later date, Keiko stammered. She quickly coughed into her hand and tried to get back on track. Now, to the point we brought you all here, as Naruto-sama has managed to manifest the Rinnegan, we believe it would only be proper if he were to start a clan here in Konoha. So that was their game. They wanted Naruto start a clan, and since he was the only member left of the Uzumaki clan, and the only one who had fully activated his demonic heritage, that essentially meant he was the one who would have to build up the clan's numbers. So you want to recreate the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Minato said. And since he is the first and only member of the Uzumaki clan that still lives, not counting Tsunadeheim thanks to her grandmother, he will be under the Clan Restoration Act. The Clan Restoration Act, or CRA, was created in order to help Kekii Genkei that were on the verge of becoming extinct by allowing an heir to marry multiple women. There was no true limit to the number of women a male could marry, though there was a minimum requirement of 4. In order to keep the clan from going extinct, the last member of the clan had to impregnate those women by the time of his 18th birthday. If the last member of the clan was a female, then she would have to marry and bear a child by her 18th birthday, and if that child was male, they would then be subject to the CRA. It was an old law, one that had only been enacted once, when the Inuzuka clan had almost gone extinct during the First Shinobi War. And Minato knew that Uchiha Sasuke would likely be subject to the law, though Minato was thinking of simply using the boy's seed to impregnate women as the boy was mentally unstable. If he allowed it, Naruto would also be subject to that law, but I don't think so, Minato said, shocking those present. Before anyone could complain, he continued. The Uzumaki clan is a clan of Yuzushiogakure no Saito, and while Yuzu may have been destroyed, our alliance with them was never discharged. Any Uzumaki who becomes a shinobi of Konoha is not subject to our laws. That is why Kushina-chan wasn't placed under the CRA when she married me. Naruto has every right to refuse being placed under it, and there is nothing anyone can do about that. Minato had to admit the council had come up with a clever plan, and one he suspected did not actually come from them. He would bet his Hokage hat that one of the elders, or possibly Danzo, had come up with the idea and used their influence to make the Civilian Council do their bidding. He knew they were the ones that usually came up with ploys like this. During his tenure as Hokage, the first time they had attempted something similar with a boy who hailed from Kiri who had a unique jutsu they thought was a bloodline. It hadn't been, but that had not stopped them from trying to get the jutsu in their grasp. But the Rinnegan, Keiko stuttered, trying to explain to the Hokage why it was so important for Naruto to bear as many children as possible, is nearly impossible for anyone to gain, Minato said. At one point in time there had been over 1 million Uzumaki clan members, and yet none of them had the Rinnegan. From what Naruto told me, and what we know based on the fact that no other Uzumaki member gained the Rinnegan, we can assume that it's nearly impossible to activate. Even if Naruto restarted the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, there is a very good chance that none of his children will have the Rinnegan. Now, if that's all you wanted to talk about, then this meeting is hereby over. The scene at the training ground Naruto and Enko had decided to go to for their own use was a picture of mass destruction. The ground was littered with pockmarks and craters, trees had been felled and several were even burnt down to nothing but stumps. There were several patches where the ground had been burned by a Katon Jutsu, a few large puddles of water from a Suiton Jutsu and large mounds of upturned earth from Doton Jutsu. In the center of this destruction were Naruto and Anko. The two of them had been sparring for around an hour, give or take a few minutes. Naruto had to admit that while Anko wasn't as powerful as her sensei, and she was nowhere near as fun to battle as Itachi, Kisame, Kakazu and Haiden had been, she was still enjoyable to spar with. She just had this way of fighting that he couldn't help but admire. The woman was almost as unpredictable as him, though her unpredictability was more of an attribute due to random spurts of violence than any instinctive battle genius. Naruto was at the moment dodging punch after punch that Anko sent his way. She was very proficient at her late sensei's Hebiken fighting style, her movements both fluid and unpredictable, making it hard for most people to combat her. Which is why it was a good thing Naruto was not most people. He dodged and wove between the woman's attacks, using his superior speed and reflexes to keep several steps ahead of her. While she was decently fast, her speed was nothing compared to his and her body simply did not have the ability to reach his level of physical prowess. As one of her fists came in again, Naruto grabbed it and tossed Anko over his shoulder. Anko managed to flip herself in mid-air and land on her feet, though she was sent skidding across the ground due to the speed with which she was tossed. Looking up, she was just in time to see Naruto come at her again. He came in with several punches, alternating between simple jabs and hooks. They were easy enough to fend off, but then he surprised Anko by dropping to the ground and attempting to sweep her off of her feet. Anko managed to jump over his foot just in time. She landed on her feet a little distance away and eyed the blonde with a smirk. "Ha, you don't think such a juvenile attack could catch me, do you?" she asked. "Not really," Naruto replied with a shrug. "But this next move will." In a burst of pure speed, Naruto rocketed over to Anko, who barely had any time to get his assault up as he began assaulting her fists and feet. It wasn't long before several of Naruto's punches began getting through, one particular punch knocking the wind right out of Anko and sending her to the ground. She landed on her back, and before she could even think about getting back up, Naruto was crouched next to her with a kunai at her neck. Anko huffed. "I hate you," she mumbled. "Ah, don't be like that, Anko-chan," Naruto said as he helped her stand up. "We both know if you hated me you would have castrated me a month ago." "Humph." Naruto chuckled as Anko turned her head and pouted. Looking up at the sky, he saw that the sun was beginning to set. He looked back at Anko and said, "It's getting pretty late. Do you want to go and get some Ichiraku with me?" "Can't," Anko said. "I've got a shift at INT. We're still trying to get that missing ninja border patrol caught to crack." "Ah, well, good luck with that," Naruto said. He thought about asking Kyuubi if she wanted to get some ramen with him, but he knew she was likely still at the hot springs. If there was one thing she loved as much as wine, it was a nice long soak at the hot springs. He probably wouldn't see her until she came in after the hot spring closed. "Right, so I'll you later?" Anko asked, suddenly acting uncharacteristically shy, "at least if you didn't know her." Naruto had spent enough time with Anko to know that she was a lot less sure of herself than she made herself out to be in public. "Of course," Naruto said with a grin. "I was actually thinking of seeing that new Princess Gale movie with Kit next week. If you wanted to do something similar sometime." Anko frowned at the mention of Kit, but it was gone before Naruto could place it. She smiled a moment later and said, "I may take you up on that." She looked around for a moment, as if expecting someone to be spying on them. When she had determined no one was around, Anko leaned over and kissed Naruto on the cheek. "I'll see you later, Naruto-kun," she said cuckily, turning around and rushing off before the blonde could see her blush. Naruto touched a hand to his cheek before chuckling and walking towards Ichiraku's. When he got there, he was just about to yell out to Ayam and Tucci to get him the Uzumaki Deluxe Special, a ramen dish made specifically for Naruto's monster stomach. He closed his mouth, however, when he saw that Ichiraku seemed to have a new employer. Said employee was a woman with straight blonde hair framing her face with a shorter cut in the back and the front bangs reaching her shoulders and blue eyes. She was wearing the outfit that Ayam usually wore, a white robe with folds at the arm, and a dark blue apron with a ribbon that tied at the top. However, the thing that Naruto noticed the most was her breasts, which were easily on the size of DD cup and nearly a 2/3 RDS larger than Kyuubi's. The apron she was wearing did very little to hide those, and Naruto couldn't help but wonder how they fit on such a slender figure. Not that he was stupid enough to get caught looking at her chest. Naruto kept his eyes on hers the entire time. "Hello," the woman greeted with a smile. "What can I get you?" A Uzumaki Deluxe Special please," Naruto said, getting back on track as he sat at his usual seat. "Comin' right up," the mysterious and attractive blonde woman said as she went to make his order. As Naruto watched the woman work, he decided to try and make some conversation in an attempt to get to know her. "You know, I don't think I've seen you around Konoha. Are you new here?" "Yes," the woman said as she started to stir-fry the noodles. "I just got here a few days ago." "So where did you move from?" asked Naruto. "A village to the north of here," she said. "It's a small village called Senzuka. I doubt you've heard of it." "No, I can't say that I have," Naruto said as his ramen was brought to him. He had to admit the ramen smelled good. If it tasted as good as it smelled, he would be in heaven. However, now the moment of truth was upon him. He snapped his chopsticks and twirled some ramen on them. Placing the ram in his mouth, Naruto's face held a look of contemplation as he chewed the noodle dish. "This is good," he said after a few moments. "You have a talent as a chef." "Thank you," the woman replied with a light blush on her face as she looked away. She looked back at Naruto, who had gone back to eating quietly and slowly. Kyuubi had instilled manners in him at one point, letting him know how disgusting it was to see him inhale his food like a man dying of starvation. He had since gotten much better with his table manners. "So are you a shinobi?" "Ha!" Naruto looked up at the question before nodding and giving a grin. "Yep, I'm actually a newly promoted Tokubetsu Jonin." "Is that like a special kind of ninja?" asked the woman, seeming interested in what he had to say. "Sort of," Naruto said. He stopped talking for a moment to polish the bowl off. Jonin are the elite ninja of the village, and Tokubetsu Jonin are those who either specialize in something or were field promoted to Jonin. He held up his bowl and gave a sheepish grin as he asked, "Would you mind making another bowl of ramen, please?" "Sure, same thing." At receiving a nod, she went back over to the stove where she began cooking again. "And what do you specialize in?" "Actually, I was field promoted due to my actions in the recent Chunin exams." The woman nodded and said, "I had heard you guys were invaded during the exams." "We were, but there was no serious damage," Naruto said. The two of them spoke for a little longer, with Naruto polishing off 20 more bowls of ramen, much to the blonde woman's shock. They didn't talk about anything specific, just random news and a little about themselves. When Naruto was finished, he paid for the food and was about to leave when the woman spoke again. "I was wondering," when Naruto turned to her, the blonde woman blushed and continued saying, "Since I'm new here, would you mind giving me a tour of Konoha sometime?" Naruto looked at her for a few seconds as he pondered her request. Eventually he said, "Sure, I don't see a problem with that. But," he held up a finger and wagged it at her, "from now on I want you to just be yourself. That demure act doesn't really suit you." He grinned when he saw the surprised look on the blonde's face. Naruto was just about to leave when he realized something and asked, "You know, I just realized never told me your name." The woman blinked and gained a thoughtful look, seemingly trying to recall if she had given her name or not. "You're right," she said at last, and seemed genuinely surprised. "My name is Samui." "No surname?" "Not that I know of," Samui said with a shrug. "Alright, well I'll see you later, Samui-san," Naruto said. "I'll be free tomorrow. If you're interested, I can show you around Konoha then." Samui nodded as Naruto left. The blonde headed for his home, where he would study the sealing books his father had got him before Kyuubi came home. That's it for part 8. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.